This is how my broken dependency workflow was, and this is how I fixed it. Just so you know, I'm using Python here. And the question that I had to work this entire week is if freezing the entire environment in Python is not good enough to make it reproducible, then what is? And the second question that stems from that is, does that mean that Python environments are fundamentally not reproducible? So as I mentioned, I spent almost an entire week working on this problem. So I'm going to do my best here so that it doesn't use an entire week of your time to fix this issue. It all starts with understanding why my specific workflow was broken. Now, if you were thinking, well, why am I talking to you about my specific workflow? And it's not because I want to talk about my specific work, it's because this was the most intuitive way of working, and most people work like that. And by the way, it works with simple projects, but as soon as you get to something that is a little bit more sophisticated, then everything breaks. So here is the workflow. First, you work locally on your computer. And that work probably involves multiple libraries that you're going to install, what we call modules or dependencies. This is just simply what you do when you work in Python, right? And then you freeze the entire environment once you're happy with the new features. And of course, when I say freezing, it just means freezing the dependencies, right? So in practice, that means you generate a requirements.txt where there is all of the versions of all of the libraries that are in the local environment. And usually we'll use pipe freeze to do that because it's just the easiest way to generate that document. So that's what the requirements look like, right? Just modules and versions, and that's it, right? And then once it's done, then you push it onto the server. And then the server is going to use the requirements file to install everything. And then we have this, same as this. And that is incorrect. Because here's the catch. When you work, you're installing libraries gradually. But this part is not gradual. When you're installing the requirements.txt on the server, this is not gradual at all. It's going to rebuild everything. And so there might be conflicts. And the problem with that is when you push your actual modifications, then the push is going to fail because the conflicts in the libraries are just not going to compile and the solver is not going to be able to make it. And this is extremely annoying because what you want to do is solving real problems. You don't want to have to deal with gaps between the local modifications and the actual server. Now here's the question, why is building everything from scratch different from doing it gradually? But now, why is there conflicts though? I mean, the requirements are exactly everything that was on the local computer, right? Like all of the modules with all of the versions. So if it works locally, it should work on the server. What's the difference? Why is it that building it gradually makes a difference? When you gradually add something, here's what's going to happen. There is going to be a solver that is going to look at if there is going to be conflicts or not with the other libraries, but not all of them. And that's the issue. It's not going to check everything. It's only going to check part of your environment. In short, some of the conflicts are just going to slip through the cracks. And the solver is going to tell you everything's fine. There is no conflict between libraries. And of course, that's not going to be true. So how do we fix the issue? Well, the first step doesn't change. You just work locally on your computer. But then step 2 is going to be a little bit different. The first step is you update a file called requirements.in. And this is done manually because this is just the smallest amount of libraries that you're using in order to run the code. So this is different from the requirements.txt because not only don't you have the versions in it, or maybe you have the versions for 1 or 2 library, but also you don't have all of the weird libraries that get installed automatically because of all of the other modules. Now granted, we are gonna need those, but right now, this is not what that file is about. And then we use a specific solver that is going to generate the requirements.txt without conflict. And once you have that, you validate it locally. How do you do that? You delete the virtual environment locally and you rebuild it. Why do you do that? Because this is exactly what's going to happen on the server. So if it works locally, then you validated it locally. And it's going to work on the server 100% of the time. And only then is the environment frozen. And then you just push and you're done. But here's the last thing though. What's that part? Before I answer this, you might want to create your own custom AI. And if you're just a beginner, I know that it can be a little bit tough. So that's the reason why I created a free online course that is explaining you how to do that. So you can click on the link in the description to get it. So now let me answer that question. What is that for? It's for when to actually do that. Meaning, are you going to create the requirements.in, do the pipe-compile thing, and create the requirements.txt and all of that, and recreate the environment every single time you want to push something on the server? Well, of course it's going to be automated, but still, it's going to take too much time if you do that every single time. So when you don't need to do that, you just validate and freeze it, and you don't need to do anything, right? But when do you decide to do it automatically is the question. And the answer is it's going to be when there is a gap between the requirements.txt and the virtual environment. What type of delta are we going to consider? A delta of time. Because think about it, after modifying the virtual environment, if the requirements.txt have a big difference in time, that means we haven't updated it. And so we need to update it. And then there is also the opposite case. What if the requirements.txt changed, but the virtual environment didn't? What does that mean? If the virtual environment is older than the requirements.txt, that means we pulled something from the server that was more recent. How could that be? Either you did that from another computer, meaning you pushed something on the server from another computer where there were new libraries, or somebody else did that. If that's you, that means you're working with multiple computers, and so that's fine. So to summarize, if the virtual environment and the requirements.txt don't have a big difference in time or a big different timestamp, that means you are good to go. You don't need to regenerate everything. Thanks for watching and see you in the next one.